Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerized. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, everybody, welcome to the show. We got a great show for you guys today on this Friday afternoon. So those of you on the live stream, we're a little early today. Those of you watching the recap for the live stream, I do apologize, but I've got some things to do to take care of today. But thank you to those who joined me on the live stream today. We're going to have a good show. So I'm going to try to get through these as fast as possible. So probably not going to take any breaks. Or if we do, it's going to be real short. So let's just, get right through them. And we're going to start out, of course, with Donald Trump's patriotic education. What I think about that, you're not going to be surprised. We've got an ex-aide to Mike Pence making a very powerful ad against Donald Trump. We got Jared Kushner on COVID. We've got the Trump administration going after trans people, of course, as well as Texas cops cracking skulls. So, and being rewarded for it. So, here we go. Let's dive right in.
We must clear away the twisted web of lies in our schools and classrooms and teach our children the magnificent truth about our country. We want our sons and daughters to know that they are the citizens of the most exceptional nation in the history of the world.
All right, that was, of course, President Donald Trump announcing his goals for the 1776 Commission. So now that's, of course, an executive order from Donald Trump in order to restore what he calls patriotic education. So basically, nationalistic propaganda aimed at hiding the bad things America has done or has done in the past. And so, I tend to think about that as far as, hiding the past. I don't think that's a good idea. I think if a nation does not know its past, it's doomed to repeat it, which I can see a lot in America, where a lot of people do not know the history of this country. And so, yes, we're absolutely repeating it. But look, this commission, just to kind of break it down simply, is a response to the repeated claims by conservatives that schools are too left-wing, that they're teaching like Marxist revisionist history. It's ridiculous, right? So, I mean, okay, did slavery not happen? Because conservatives love to compare everything to slavery, right? They love to compare wearing masks to slavery, which is absolutely ridiculous. That America did not have intense, periods of intense racism and hate. Well, I'm pretty sure they have. For example, Congress banned Chinese people from coming into America. Not just Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not the first American president to do that. No. In fact, back in the 1800s, Congress banned Chinese people after they helped build the railroads. Why? Because racism. Or what about crimes against indigenous Americans? For example, Andrew Jackson driving indigenous people further out west from their homes in what was described as a death march, referred to as the Trail of Tears. So we actually didn't learn a lot about that in school. At least I didn't. We actually spent a lot of time talking about how the American Revolution was amazing and awesome and wonderful. And so maybe I'm older, maybe because I'm older, education has gotten a little bit better. I don't know. In that case, wonderful. I'm glad that they're teaching about these things. Why? It's not to shit on America. It's because we want America to be better. In order to make America better, we've got to face our past, right? And so I want America to live up to our ideals, right? And again, the only way to do that is to have a very uncomfortable look at the terrible things this country has done and analyze them and say, okay, where did we go wrong? And how do we not do that again, right? That's important to look at the past. That's why it's important to see how and why things are the way they are today. The legacy of slavery, for example, Jim Crow, segregation, how that impacts the modern world. That's important to look at. And of course, it does have impacts. White people in this country, on average, have more wealth in this country than black people. It's a good example of this, right? Why? It's because we've had longer to build that wealth. We didn't have to, bounce back from being literal chattel slaves to other people, okay? We've had longer to build this wealth. And not only that, but we didn't have systems in place that prevented people from, acquiring wealth. And even though most of those systems are dismantled, not all of them, but many of them, well, it makes it really tough for black people to catch up. That's a good example of knowing the past and then dealing with the past to try to make a better future, right? That's why the history of this country is really important. And so, but that's what Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to hide or play down. Again, we've seen examples of textbooks where they downplay the history of racism. They downplay just how brutal and horrific slavery really was, okay? And I understand that there's ways of teaching younger people about that, and the desire, I guess, to protect younger people from the harshness of the reality of it. But at the same time, these are things that people eventually really need to know if they're going to be informed about the state of the country and why things are the way that they are. And so, again, that's not what Donald Trump's doing. Donald Trump basically made this commission in order to rebuke the 1619 Project, okay? And, of course, the reason conservatives hate it is pretty twofold. For one, again, it points out the history of American, or the legacy of American chattel slavery and how it impacts black people today. Direct rebuke of conservative racist, ideology and the narrative that the only thing that's bad about this is black culture. That's the reason why black people can't get ahead in this country. Or some people also hold the genetic argument, because the thinking goes, if it's a problem with black people, then we don't actually have to do anything to fix it because, well, they're just inherently flawed, right? If it's environmental, as the 1619 Project points out, well, then we actually have to do something about it in order to bring black people up to parity, which involves, in some way, some form, reparations, right? In order to bring people up to, like I said, up to parity. Now, I'm not saying like reparations as far as let's just dump a whole bunch of money on black people, right? That's not necessarily what reparations means. It can take form. It can take many different forms in ways that could actually benefit the black community far better. Things like investing in their education, investing in their communities, with better jobs, better careers, bringing up to pay parity, as black people make on average about 83 cents for every dollar a white man makes. And so there are issues like that we can actually do something about and fix to help bridge the gap. But also, it's going to take time after dismantling those systems to allow black people to start building up that wealth that we as white people tend to enjoy. On average, right? And I'm not saying that that's experience is true for every person. But like I said, if people do not know the history, then people are not going to be compelled to fix anything. And that is the goal, to make people ignorant of the history and, more importantly, blindly patriotic. And that's a problem. And that's exactly, by the way, what every nationalist authoritarian leader does. They do this blind patriotism. They erase history. They do political correctness. They project everything they do onto the opposition. And we have definitely seen that from Donald Trump. It's fascism 101. And of course, you have to target youth with the bullshit, right? Because, well, younger people are more impressionable. And so they did the same thing back in Nazi Germany. Look, if you don't get it, you're not paying attention, okay? His argument, by the way, is couched in, well, the left, they just want to protest against American citizens being murdered by police. And, that's why they want to take down statues of people who, actually, rebelled against America, Confederate traitors. Look, again, it doesn't make any sense, right? Until you realize the whole point is to lie, distort, and whitewash the history of this country because it helps them both politically and economically. What this patriotic education is just political correctness by another name. Okay. No, this is not from yesterday. This is live. This is for today. What's going on here is we started a little bit early because I've got things to do right after the show. So I got to kind of get through this stuff pretty fast, but I wanted to give you guys a live stream. All right, moving on. A new report in Vanity Fair shines a light on just how much power Jared Kushner wields in the administration and how much he doesn't give a damn about people dying from coronavirus as long as they're Democrats. So now this is, again, from Vanity Fair here. And really, it's a group, apparently a group of business leaders had met back in March at FEMA to discuss manufacturing more PPE, masks, gloves, face shields, all that stuff that at the time was in very short supply. And so that's pretty important, okay? Now, during the meeting, government officials urged these business leaders to return the next day to meet with Jared Kushner to discuss what the government could do to help facilitate that. For example, doing the Defense Production Act in order to also make sure that these companies would get compensated for switching over their production lines to PPE, okay? Things like that. Now, these business leaders, they did meet with Kushner, and here's what happened. Kushner, apparently right off the bat, laid down basically this edict and saying that the federal government is not going to lead this response. That is not our job. They said literally, quote, "It's up to the states to figure out what they want to do." Now, that shouldn't surprise you. It didn't surprise me because that's the same thing Donald Trump had been saying at that time, okay? Now, the question for me is, well, did Donald Trump come up with that position or did Jared Kushner come up with that position? Who's in charge here? Who's in charge here? I'm kind of curious to know. So now, when you look at the little details, apparently even where Kushner is sitting, right, you can kind of tell that he wants to be in charge. Kushner was actually seated in a chair that was taller than the others around the conference table and was actually running a shadow task force that ran in parallel to the one led by Vice President Mike Pence. That shadow task force actually had a lot of power. Now, those private sector representatives said that they wanted to produce PPE if the federal government promised to buy them. And they wanted the president to invoke the Defense Production Act to make that happen very quickly. We were all saying, quote, "Mr. Kushner, If you want to fix this problem for PPE and ventilators, there's a path to do it, but you have to make a policy change, recalled one person who attended the meeting. Kushner then got very aggressive and insisted that they didn't understand how government worked as well as he did, although that attendee said his arguments made no sense. So, challenge Kushner, and he turns into, and look, I've seen this description before, he's basically mini Trump. And so that right there is the most Trumpian thing I've seen. Dude, nobody could ever understand government as much as I do. I understand it better than anybody else. So don't tell me what to do. Okay? It's Donald Trump, but without any of the personality or the flair, just the anger. Okay? And just the, narcissism. So now Kushner, according to one person that was there, he said, quote, "It felt like Kushner was the president. He sat in the chair and was clearly making the decisions." One attendee also told Kushner that Americans were bidding against each other for the limited supply of PPE, and that person explained that businesses that wanted to help were looking for leadership from the federal government. Kushner's response to that was, quote, "Free markets will solve this. That's not the role of the government." Free markets, guys. The free markets will solve this. I mean, 6 million people in America are infected, over 200,000 people dead. We still don't have enough tests for everybody. 40 million people are unemployed. Surely the free market did not solve anything at all. And by the way, if the government's role is not to help its citizens during a pandemic, then seriously, what is the point of government? I mean, I know some people will say that, ironically, well, there's no role. I'm so smart. We should abolish government. Well, that's ridiculous. Why not, if you hold that position, find an island somewhere with no government and see how well you do? I mean, surely you can get somebody to build your roads and create your anti-government paradise, right? I mean, if it's so bad here in America, well, why haven't you done so already? Oh, right. It's because most people don't want to live in a neo-feudal bullshit paradise that is extremely right-wing. But anyway, that person agreed that, yes, open markets could solve some problems or many problems, but said right now, because of the crisis, the system was breaking. Because pandemic response and similar crisis is why we have a government in the first place, in order to handle that stuff. Now, that same person then pointed to a CNN report about New York and Andrew Cuomo. Now, at the time, Andrew Cuomo was incredibly desperate for supplies for New York, as they were getting hit incredibly hard at the time. So now, Kushner said, that's CNN bullshit. They lie. You're saying they're lying about Cuomo trying to get more aid for his state and failing, trying to get the administration to give more aid to the state. I see. Right. But he also said, and this is very telling, his people are going to suffer, and that's their problem. And added, Cuomo didn't pound the phones hard enough to get the PPE for his state. So, wait. So, there wasn't enough PPE available, right? And the federal government at the time was making the states fight against each other. And now he goes and points at Cuomo and says, well, he should have gotten the phone harder. I mean, that's his fault that, people, it's strictly his fault that people are suffering in New York. And by the way, those are his people, so why should I care? They don't see blue states as part of America or cities, right? I mean, Kushner does not look like he looks at the most one of the most populous cities in the country. He looks at it and says, not my people, their people. We don't care about them. They don't matter to him. They don't matter to Donald Trump. Understand that they don't care about you. Even if you're a conservative living in New York and LA, right? He doesn't care about you. They don't care about you. They have no empathy for their fellow Americans. Now, following that, One attendee did tell Vanity Fair, quote, "That's when I was like, we're screwed." That would be an accurate assessment. Now, others lamented the fact that it was a missed opportunity. Quote, "We had so much potential to commandeer against us. We had a real system for contact tracing, the world's best mobile engineers on standby. There was a real opportunity to have a coordinated response." At the time, one attendee said, who remains angry, by the way, at the government's inaction on COVID, says, "I thought of it just as blind capitalism and extreme libertarian ideals gone wrong. In hindsight, it's not crazy to think it was some purposeful belief that it was okay if Cuomo had a tough go of it because New York is a blue state." Which, of course, makes sense. Another attendee told Vanity Fair that it seemed very clear that Kushner lacked a sense of urgency because the virus was hitting blue states the hardest. "We were flabbergasted," that person said. "I basically had an out-of-body experience. Where am I? What happened to America?" Well, I hate to break it to you, but that is America. Right now, we are so incredibly polarized. Remember, I pointed out before, where you've got at least a third of Americans that don't give a shit about the other two-thirds. Those are the Trump voters. Those are the extreme Republicans and the libertarians. They don't care. And in some cases, like the people parading around Target telling people to take off their masks, they're actually trying to get people killed. It's amazing. Or at least trying to get people infected with COVID-19. They don't see them. They don't see people who disagree with them politically as human beings. Eric Trump, he remarked, he was in an interview with Hannity. He said, "Democrats aren't even human." That's what we're dealing with in this country. That's who these people are. They don't see them as human, and they don't care about them. Again, he literally let people die in New York because it's a blue state. If Obama ever did anything like this, there would be 1 billion investigations. He'd have been impeached already. Or if Hillary Clinton were president, right? And 10,000 people died of coronavirus. Because obviously coronavirus was going to happen. And if 10,000 people died, just a fraction of what we've seen from COVID-19, you know what the Republican response would be? It'd be Benghazi times 1 billion. Okay? They'd never let it go. Investigation, impeach Hillary, lock her up. She's killing Americans. Hillary lied. People died. 200,000, though, dead under Trump. And the number will continue to go up, by the way. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. It's amazing. And, of course, it's being justified as they're Democrats anyway. I mean, this administration is disgusting. And the people that support it, it's a death cult. It's what it is. It's all it is. And by the way, Kushner's he's, you know, one of the guys who's responsible for quote unquote fighting against COVID, which you can see in our response. We're not actually fighting against COVID anymore. The administration has basically given up. You know, Trump goes out and says, well, it'll disappear. It'll disappear anyway. And then they're trying to rush a vaccine. Now, I'm very pro-vaccine, right? I would not take that. If they try to rush it by November, I ain't taking that. No way. No way. And by the way, the CDC head, Robert Redford, he comes out and he says, is it Robert Redford? It might be an actor. But I know the CDC head, Redford, he comes out and he says, during a hearing this week, that masks are going to be more effective than a vaccine anyway. That he believes mask wearing is going to be more effective than even when a vaccine comes out because, again, you know, like most people, yes, most people will generate an immune response, but there's about 30%, he says, might not. And so, yes, you combine the vaccine with a mask, that's a good thing, It's way better than just doing the vaccine alone. And so, Redford. Redford. What am I thinking? It's Robert Redfield. But anyway, it's this. Look, this is who they are. This is who they are, and they're sociopaths. All right. Anyway, let's move on here. Thank you for the correction. I'm bad with names. A lifelong Republican and former top administration official has abandoned Donald Trump, and she put out an excellent ad explaining why.
I'm Olivia Troy. I was Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to Vice President Pence and served as Vice President Pence's lead staff member on the COVID-19 response. You know, I've been on the COVID task force from day one. I mean, the virus was very unpredictable at the beginning. There were a lot of unknowns, but towards the middle of February, we knew it wasn't a matter of if COVID would become a big pandemic here in the United States. It was a matter of when. But the president didn't want to hear that because his biggest concern was that we were in an election year and how is this going to affect what he considered to be his record of success. It was shocking to see the president saying that the virus was a hoax, saying that everything's okay when we know that it's not. The truth is, he doesn't actually care about anyone else but himself. He made a statement once that was very striking. I never forgot it because it pretty much defined who he was. When we were in a task force meeting, the president said, maybe this COVID thing is a good thing. I don't like shaking hands with people. I don't have to shake hands with these disgusting people. Those disgusting people are the same people that he claims to care about. These are the people still going to his rallies today who have complete faith in who he is. If the president had taken this virus seriously, or if he had actually made an effort to tell how serious it was, he would have slowed the virus spread. He would have saved lives. It was the opportunity in honor of a lifetime to be able to serve in the White House. I put my heart and soul into this role every single day. But at some point, I would come home at night, I would look myself in the mirror and say, are you really making a difference? Does it matter? Because no matter how hard you work and what you do, the president is going to do something that is detrimental to keeping Americans safe, which is why you signed up for this role. It was awful. It was terrifying. I have been a Republican for my entire life. I am a McCain Republican, I am a Bush Republican, and I am voting for Joe Biden because I truly believe we are at a time of constitutional crisis. At this point, it's country over party.
All right, so look, that's a strong ad. I think the most striking part, of course, is the meeting where he talked about the virus being good for him, right? Because it doesn't have to deal with the disgusting people. You know Trump's a germaphobe. I know Trump's a germaphobe. That should be common knowledge, right? So understand that he thinks those disgusting people, well, that's you guys. That's you guys. That's what he thinks of you, right? All you are is just marks. He thinks you're dumb and gross. And so understand that's who he is. He lies to the American people, gaslights them constantly, and yet here's another person in the long line of people who has just confirmed it. You are a mark. You are a means to the end in order to feed his ego and allow him to get more money and more power. If you're a Trump voter, stop. Stop. And by the way, she is not the first person to have left this administration. We've seen a ton of people get fired or just leave on their own. A lot of times because the president asked them to do illegal things and they wouldn't do it. He'd ask for loyalty, not to America, but to him personally. Okay? And my other favorite point was when she talked about whether or not she can look herself in the mirror, being on the coronavirus task force. Because look, is she doing anything? Well, the coronavirus task force hasn't really, look, I should say the president hasn't really done anything. Okay? Congress hasn't really done anything. And it's because the coronavirus task force was being undermined by a shadow task force ran by Jared Kushner. They basically said, states, you're on your own. That's not the role of the federal government. The free market's going to take care of it, right? And look, also, Kushner didn't give a damn about the virus affecting the blue states, and so they didn't care. Not their problem. That said, is it going to move a lot of Republicans? So that's the question. That's why they do this. This is another person who is she even said she's a pro John McCain, pro George W. Bush Republican, right? That's part of your never Trump Republican group. Is it going to move most Republicans? No, not at all. Republicans still overwhelmingly approve of Donald Trump. And they even approve of his response to coronavirus. His hardcore followers still think it's a hoax, which is what the president has said on many occasions. Why? Because it's no longer a political party. You have to understand, the people that have not left Trump now are never going to leave Trump because it's not about facts. It's not about reality. It's not even about party. It's about blind obedience to a cult leader. That's what it is. And so, yes, they're going to continue to support him. Another thing that I have, of course, is the rehabilitation of George W. Bush, right? I'm a George W. Bush Republican. Okay, so you're one of the people that led us into a disastrous war in the Middle East, in which hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq died. Okay? Now, look, 200,000 people have died from COVID in America. Okay? And so that's horrific. And then you look at what we did overseas as a result of George W. Bush. But since it didn't happen to Americans, well, they don't really care a whole lot about that. Okay? And so, look, yeah, Bush-era Republicans, you're going to vote against Trump. That's good, right? But that doesn't mean that you're my friend. It doesn't mean that I absolve you of all the other stuff that you did beforehand, as well as, of course, lead the party to Donald Trump. Look, Trumpism is the end result of conservative ideology. It really is. And we saw that pop up all throughout the years, throughout the Bush years, ever since 9/11. Okay, over 1 million in Afghanistan, as you point that out, yes. Now, part of what led to Donald Trump is picking people like Sarah Palin to be VP. That was John McCain, okay? Not only that, but if you went against the Iraq War when George W. Bush was president, you were apparently treasonous. The Dixie Chicks have still never recovered, okay? And the government, by the way, was given massive spying powers, homeland security, all that stuff. Donald Trump is using that to great effect against the left. And so voting for Biden, first of all, it's not really going to do anything to erase that past, right? Biden is basically an incredibly conservative Democrat, right? And so this vote, I think it's pretty easy for them. Sure, vote for a very conservative Democrat who's pretty much like an old school Republican anyway, or vote for the obvious fascist. I mean, at least they're not voting for the fascist, and at least you might move a few people in swing states away from Donald Trump, but are we really going to go forward? And that's my problem with Biden. I am still voting for Biden, and I know that this is right now the best that we can hope for. But going after these, suburban Republicans, people like her, again, I don't know how many people she's going to move, maybe a few. But you know what? I think we would be better off trying to court progressives with progressive policy and ideology. But nonetheless, hey, at least welcome to the not as horrible side. Hopefully we can at least defeat Trump, and then, well, we're going to turn around and start fighting Bush-era Republicans again. All right. Let's move on. the Trump administration is now pushing for a rule change that would allow homeless shelters to discriminate against transgender Americans. So now the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under Ben Carson is pushing to roll back legal protections, barring shelter programs that accept HUD grants from discriminating on the basis of gender identity or expression. So now this rule is called the Equal Access Rule. This is what they're trying to get rid of. And it was created in 2012 under the Obama administration in order to protect transgender people, homeless transgender people, from ending up on the street, where, of course, they face even more discrimination and violence. Now, Carson, he says, well, we're just trying to protect cisgender women from, as he put it last fall, quote unquote, big hairy men trying to infiltrate women's shelters and harm occupants. Well, for one, that's completely false. That's a bullshit debunked narrative. Actually, no, and I know this is anecdotal, but I know quite a few transgender women, and believe me, none of them fit that description. But even if they did, in the case of non-gender binary women, for example, it doesn't matter, because there's a lot of evidence that trans women, especially trans women of color, are actually the ones who are more victimized than anyone. They get victimized in bathrooms, they get victimized in shelters, they get victimized on the street, far more than cis women. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't look out for cis women as well, but trans women, especially again trans women of color, are the most victimized. But understand that this rule change from HUD is incredibly discriminatory. They even include a guide for judging a woman to be trans by her height or facial hair. As if, of course, tall cis women don't exist, or cis women with facial hair, even as a result of an excess of androgens. Look, again, deeply discriminatory for absolutely no reason, and it's all about the culture war. Okay, so let me give you some stats about how bad the situation is. Already, nearly 1 in 3 transgender Americans have been homeless in their lifetime, oftentimes as a result of a family kicking them out for their gender expression. Again, homelessness leads to violence, possibly leading to death. For example, the number of reported killings of transgender people in 2020 stands at least 28, and of course is expected to increase. That has already surpassed the total for all of 2019. Okay? And with this pandemic, it's getting worse. People are losing their homes. They can't afford rent. They can't afford the mortgage payments. There are mass evictions. And look, I understand you want to protect women, right? I want to protect women as well. I just happen to think that trans women are women. And allowing trans women who are women to be included in these protections doesn't harm cis women at all. Even HUD itself admits that they are not aware of any data suggesting that transgender individuals pose an inherent risk to cisgendered women. Because they don't. Because they don't. Again, they are more victimized. They're more at risk of death. For example, and this didn't happen in America. Well, actually, it did. It happened in Puerto Rico, right? So there was a woman, a transgender woman named Nelisa Luciano Ruiz, a trans woman. She was murdered in Toa Baja because she was trans, because she used a woman's restroom. She dared to use a woman's restroom. And they murdered her for it. That's it. So, look, all trans women want to do is use a bathroom. That's it. Like, they go into the bathroom to use the bathroom. They're not preying on other people. So I don't understand the focus on where people, go to pee. But understand that conservatives are obsessed with this because it's about the culture wars. It's about instilling fear into people. And they scare cis women into believing that trans women are a threat, when in reality, they're not a threat. And the people that are far more threatening to cis women are actually people like Donald Trump, who, again, just got another rape allegation from a model over 20 years ago. And so understand that you've got people that are very powerful men in business, people like Harvey Weinstein, right? People in government. They are far more dangerous to cis women as well as trans women than trans women could ever be. And so it's just more, anti-LGBT bullshit propaganda and just another way to harm Americans who are the most victimized. All right. Trans rights. That's all I got to say. Last story here. A Texas sheriff's office is under fire after audio was released confirming the use of reward for officers who use excessive force during arrests. So now, Texas Rangers have been investigating that agency's aggressive tactics in this particular area, and they found instances where officers would get gift cards to steakhouses after doing arrests that involved using force. So now, among deputies who received gift cards to places such as Logan's Roadhouse were officers J.J. Johnson and Zach Camden, officers involved in the March 2019 death of a man named Javier Ambler, who was a 40-year-old black man who was tased 4 times and ended up dying. He had a heart condition. He said, I can't breathe. They continued tasing him. And, well, I guess they were doing it so they could get a gift card to Logan's. It's amazing. All right, so now let me go to one of these recordings here where Texas Rangers were interviewing one person who was expecting to get a gift card from doing his own excessive force. Let's take a look.
I thought I was going to get a gift card from Deaton because he hands out gift cards for use of force.
Tell the ranger about that.
Yeah, people got gift cards when they had good use of forces, and I've known other officers who received gift cards for that. So
Chief Deputy Ryle gives gift cards out to officers.
Like Steakhouse, Hogan Steakhouse or something like that.
He gives out gift cards when guys are involved and deputies are involved in use of force incidents.
Yes, sir.
Holy shit. So they're basically rewarding people for using force. Force that, of course, in some cases leads to death. But hey, man, steak dinner. Who can argue with that? But now, there's more. Let's go to the next video.
So, when did you first hear about that?
That was something everybody knew about. He's even said it to people in meetings.
This was Chief
Commander D. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, do you know anybody that's ever got gift cards for? Now, when you say, elaborate a little bit on. My understanding is you're saying that, and correct me if I'm mistaken, that that it's known that Commander Deaton gives out gift cards to steakhouses or wherever for people for using force, or what's your understanding?
A good use of force.
For a good use of force,
yes,
and what do you mean by a good use of force?
He had the intention that we were all like loco badass, and you went out there and did your job, and you had to use force on somebody, and he agreed with it, you would get a gift card.
Okay.
Now, that person that they were talking to, that officer was involved in a use of force incident against a black mother, single mother. So, yeah, and he was hoping he'd get that steak dinner. Apparently, he did not. So now, what's a good use of force? That's a good question, right? What's a good use of force? Would like tasing a dad with a heart condition? Apparently. But as you heard, apparently it was common practice. Everybody knew what was going on. And so there were a lot of questions. One person, former Sergeant Troy Brogdon, he resigned from the department last year. He basically corroborated Pease's claim and told the Statesman that Deaton gave the cards for what he considered a good use of force. Quote, he would talk about it in groups, including supervisors, meetings, and classes, and I was like, what the hell? That revelation also, by the way, that top supervisors rewarded use of force provides, I'm sorry. Hold on. That was an incorrect quote here. Jeff Noble, retired deputy chief of the Irvine, California Police Department and national policing expert, added, that makes no sense to me at all. What is a good use of force? The incentive is, he says, let's go out and use more force so we can get more gift cards. The fear is that you're incentivizing bad behavior. Well, that's just not a fear. That's exactly what's going on. And it's worse considering those who often get stopped, well, look, those who often get stopped and get this force use on them are majority minority. For example, in Minneapolis, a report came out recently showing that Minneapolis police used force against black people at 7 times the rate of white people, despite white people making up about 19% of the population. Texas A&M study found that police officers were twice as likely to use force against different race neighborhoods. And data collected by the California Department of Justice covering 2016 to 2019 shows that police use force, everything from shooting a gun to firing a taser to punching someone in the face, at disproportionate levels on black Angelenos compared to their share of population. So there is a problem. It's a huge problem. And this guy, Deaton, he said, well, yeah, let's incentivize you to use more force with a steak dinner. Disgusting. And by the way, Deaton actually had to resign in September of 2019 after racist social media posts came out. There were images of dolls depicting actions such as rape and kidnapping and the mutilation of a black football player. And so I can wonder, I wonder who that player is. No, this guy's a racist piece of crap. He was rewarding people for cracking skulls, basically. I don't think there is such a thing as good use of force. Now, are there times where an officer has to defend themselves against somebody who gets violent? Sure. I understand that, right? But this is not that. This is not the same thing. This is telling officers to go and bust heads of minorities, and here, we're going to reward you for doing it. And so that is a terrible incentive. That's why, look, I keep saying the culture of police is broken. It's sick. It needs to be torn down and built up brand new. I don't think there's reform that you can do to fix this. You have to do a complete purge of people in these positions, and you have to screen people. If you want to hire them back, you got to screen them to make sure that they have no, racial animosity, that they are not connected to white supremacist groups or racists. And you have to hire people and then train them to, for one, de-escalate. These officers were not told to de-escalate. You need to train them to de-escalate the situation whenever possible. And you have to have them work with the community, not against the community, which they are doing right now. And so, yeah, we got to do something about this. This is not a way to run a police station. And it seems to happen way too often. All right. So look, I gotta go do some things. That's why I did the stream a little bit early. If you missed any of the show, don't worry. There'll be a replay, so you can go and watch segments. Or I'm gonna post all the segments up online at the normal times that I usually release them, and so you can catch it that way. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
lickety splat.
I like my meat tight. Tighten up my meat.
Mike Pounds.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.